December 8, 1941, 3:40 a.m., South China Sea. The water is flat, black, and empty, so calm it feels staged. Below the surface, the American submarine USS Seawolf creeps forward at 3 knots, electric motors whispering, hull plates ticking softly as pressure tightens around them. Inside, the air is already stale. Sweat beads on foreheads despite the cool steel walls. A young officer presses his eye to the periscope. Nothing. No escorts. No zigzagging. No urgency. Just a Japanese tanker moving alone, its deck lights glowing faintly in the darkness, like it's sailing in peacetime. You can almost feel the disbelief inside the control room. This is supposed to be impossible. Hours earlier, half a world away in Tokyo, senior officers of the Imperial Japanese Navy had been congratulating one another. Pearl Harbor had burned. American battleships lay broken in the harbor mud. The U.S. Pacific Fleet, they believed, had been shattered in a single, elegant stroke. Submarines? An afterthought. At the Navy Ministry, planners reviewed intelligence reports with thin smiles. American submarines were known quantities, they said, poorly designed, under-trained crews, bad doctrine, faulty torpedoes. The Japanese had studied U.S. Navy exercises for years and found them unimpressive. One admiral reportedly dismissed them as no more dangerous than coastal patrol craft. Japan's war plan reflected that arrogance. Tankers, fat, slow, irreplaceable tankers, were sent across the Pacific with minimal escort. Oil flowed from the Dutch East Indies to the home islands in long, exposed arteries of steel. The Japanese fleet ran on that oil. Every sortie, every carrier launch, every destroyer patrol depended on it. And the admirals believed it was safe. Back aboard USS Seawolf, the captain makes a decision. Open outer doors. Metal groans softly. The torpedo room crew holds their breath. This is still early in the war. American submariners are fighting more than the enemy. They're fighting unreliable Mark 14 torpedoes that run too deep, explode prematurely, or not at all. Every attack is a gamble. Miss, and the submarine's position is revealed. Hit, and maybe nothing happens. The firing solution is locked. Fire one! The torpedo leaves the tube with a muted thump, racing into the darkness. 30 seconds. 40. Then nothing. No explosion. A second torpedo? Still nothing. Inside the boat, jaws tighten, fists clench. Someone mutters a curse. The tanker continues on, oblivious. This, Japanese intelligence officers would later say, was exactly what they expected from American submarines. Sloppy attacks, bad weapons, no discipline. They were half right. What the Japanese could not see, what they refused to see, was what was happening inside the American submarine force. After Pearl Harbor, submarines were all the United States had left in the Pacific that could strike back immediately. Battleships were sunk, carriers were scarce, surface fleets were on the defensive, but submarines could move unseen. In forward bases like Pearl Harbor, Fremantle, and Brisbane, a quiet revolution was beginning. Young officers' men like Dudley Mush Morton, Richard O'Kane, and Eugene Fluckey were studying every failed patrol, every misfire, every missed shot. They weren't blaming the crews. They were blaming the system. They questioned torpedo depth settings. They ignored outdated doctrine that demanded long-range, cautious attacks. They pushed closer, risked more, learned faster, and when Washington refused to admit the torpedoes were defective, submarine commanders quietly adjusted them anyway. This wasn't official. It was survival. Meanwhile, Japanese confidence hardened into doctrine. Escort vessels were assigned to protect battleships and carriers, not merchant shipping. Anti-submarine warfare was treated as a secondary skill, almost beneath elite surface officers. Sonar training lagged. Depth charge tactics were rigid and predictable. Most critically, Japanese planners believed that even if some tankers were lost, America lacked the discipline and aggression to sustain a long submarine campaign. They were wrong, and the Pacific was about to prove it. By mid-1942, the pattern began to shift. Tankers disappeared, not in dramatic fleet engagements, not with radio calls or warnings, just gone. Ships that left Singapore never arrived in Japan. Convoys arrived short one, sometimes two vessels. At first it was dismissed as bad luck. Then reports started stacking up. American submarines were showing up in places they shouldn't be, near the Philippines, off Formosa, in the approaches to the home islands themselves. Their attacks were closer, bolder, sometimes launched from inside escort screens, and increasingly deadly. In Tokyo, a junior logistics officer compiled fuel delivery numbers and felt a knot tighten in his stomach. Oil imports were slipping, not catastrophically, not yet, but enough to raise questions. He forwarded the report up the chain. It stalled. Fleet commanders were focused elsewhere, on decisive battles, on carriers and battleships, on crushing the American Navy in a single climactic engagement. Submarines were still considered an annoyance, a mosquito, something to swat later. Out in the Pacific, American submariners were learning something crucial. They didn't need to sink warships to win this war. They just had to starve them. And soon, new boats faster, quieter, deadlier were entering the fight. Boats commanded by men who no longer laughed, no longer hesitated, and no longer played by the old rules. One of those boats would be named USS Wahoo, another USS Tang, and when they arrived, the laughter in Tokyo would stop. January 26, 1943, 18 p.m., Bismarck Sea. The periscope rises slowly, breaking the surface with barely a ripple. Commander Dudley Mush Morton presses his face forward, eyes scanning through the thin green lens. Ahead, moonlight glints off steel 3 ships, maybe 4, moving in loose formation. No tight convoy, no aggressive screen. Tankers? Morton doesn't smile. He doesn't need to. Behind him, his executive officer, Lieutenant Richard O'Kane, quietly calls out range and bearing. Their voices are calm now, too calm. This isn't desperation anymore. This is routine. The submarine is USS Wahoo, new, fast, and aggressive, just like its captain. Morton has thrown out much of the cautious doctrine he was taught. He prefers close-range attacks, sometimes point-blank. He wants to see the enemy when the torpedoes hit. Set depth. Shallow, he orders. It's a subtle rebellion. For months, American torpedoes had been running too deep, sliding uselessly under their targets. Official channels dragged their feet, so Morton adjusted the settings himself. If Washington wouldn't fix the problem, Wahoo would. The torpedoes leave the tubes in rapid succession. This time the ocean answers. A white flash tears into the side of the lead tanker. A second explosion follows, then a third. Flames leap skyward, reflecting off the low clouds. The ship begins to list almost immediately, its deck lights blinking out one by one. On the bridge of a nearby escort, a Japanese officer freezes. This is not what American submarines are supposed to do. Depth charges splash into the water moments later, too late, too shallow. Wahoo slips beneath them, turning hard, diving deep. The hull shudders, but the explosions are distant, unfocused. The escorts are guessing, and guessing wrong. Word spreads quickly through the submarine force. Wahoo's patrol reports read like heresy. Close attacks, surface gunfire at night. Multiple ships sunk in a single engagement. Morton doesn't just sink ships, he humiliates the enemy, slipping through escort screens and striking again before they can react. In one patrol, Wahoo devastates Japanese shipping in the Yellow Sea, an area once considered suicidal for submarines. When Morton returns to base, his boat is battered, paint-scorched, hull dented, but alive. More importantly, his results are undeniable. Other commanders take notice. So does the enemy. In Tokyo, the tone begins to shift. Escort commanders submit increasingly urgent reports. American submarines are no longer timid. They attack at night. They attack from inside convoys. Some even surface to finish off crippled ships with deck guns. This is not harassment. This is a campaign. Yet institutional arrogance dies hard. Japanese anti-submarine tactics remain rigid preset depth charges, predictable search patterns, overconfidence in visual spotting. The idea that an enemy submarine might intentionally invite an attack to slip past escorts is still unthinkable. Meanwhile, American submariners are evolving faster than their prey. Enter USS Tang. Commissioned in 1943 and commanded by Commander Richard O'Kane, Tang is the distilled evolution of everything Morton and others had learned, because O'Kane learned it from Morton himself. As Wahoo's former executive officer, he watched every bold decision, every risk, every kill. Tang's crew is young, aggressive, and terrifyingly precise. By 1944, O'Kane no longer hunts ships individually. He hunts systems. He studies tanker routes, choke points, refueling schedules. He positions Tang where ships must pass narrow straits, harbor approaches, oil lanes stretching from Borneo, Sumatra, and the Dutch East Indies toward Japan. Each sinking now has consequences far beyond tonnage. Every tanker lost is fuel that will never reach a carrier, never feed a destroyer, never power an aircraft engine. The Japanese begin to feel it. Carrier divisions curtail training sorties, not because of enemy pressure, but because fuel allocations are shrinking. Destroyers remain in port. Battleships become floating fuel reserves, unable to maneuver freely. A senior logistics officer submits a blunt assessment to Naval General Staff. Oil stockpiles are no longer sufficient for sustained operations. The response is disbelief. They still expect a decisive fleet battle to end the war. They still believe shipping losses can be replaced. They cannot. Japan lacks the industrial base to replace tankers at scale. Each ship lost is gone forever, and American submarines are sinking them faster than Japan can even count. In the Pacific, the change is visible even to American crews. Submariners begin encountering half-loaded tankers, ships trying to conserve fuel by sailing partially empty. Others are escorted by undertrained crews, hastily reassigned from surface units that can no longer operate. Some tankers run dark at night, hoping invisibility will save them. It doesn't. Tang stalks them anyway. On one patrol, O'Kane sinks multiple ships in rapid succession, weaving through escorts with surgical precision. He times his attacks so that escorts rush to one, sinking only for another explosion to bloom behind them. Japanese depth charges rain down, but they are still searching where Tang was, not where she is. By mid-1944, something unthinkable is happening. The Imperial Japanese Navy, once the most feared maritime force in Asia, is immobilizing itself. Ships stay in port not because of enemy fleets, but because there is nothing left to burn in their boilers. Pilots train less, crews lose proficiency, plans grow smaller, more desperate. And still the tankers keep exploding. In Tokyo, the laughter is gone. In its place is silence and fear, because for the first time, Japanese commanders are beginning to understand the truth. They are not being defeated by American battleships, not by carriers, not even by planes. They are being strangled slowly, invisibly by men they once dismissed as irrelevant. And the noose is tightening. June 19, 1944, Fort Roberts, 52 a.m. Inland Sea, Japan. A tanker slips through the gray dawn, hugging the coastline, escorted by two destroyers that look more tired than alert. Their crews have been at sea too long, burning fuel they can't afford to waste, guarding cargo they can't afford to lose. Below them, USS Tang waits. The submarine rests nearly motionless, trimmed perfectly, every unnecessary system shut down. Inside, the crew speaks in whispers. Sweat runs down backs despite the early hour. Commander Richard O'Kane watches the periscope view in silence, timing everything. This is no longer hunting. This is execution. When the torpedoes strike, the explosions echo off the hills lining the inland sea. Fire erupts along the tanker's deck, black smoke rolling upward in thick columns. The destroyers respond instantly, rudders hard over, screws churning the water white, but they are reacting, not controlling. Depth charges fall. Too fast, too shallow. Tang slips beneath them, sliding into the cluttered acoustic chaos of coastal waters, fishing boats, harbor noise, echoes bouncing unpredictably. Japanese sonar operators lose contact almost immediately. Above, another tanker is burning. For Japanese naval staff officers, Moments like this are no longer isolated incidents. They are patterns. By the summer of 1944, reports flood in from every direction: Formosa, the Philippines, the South China Sea, even waters near the home islands. Tankers are being sunk closer and closer to Japan itself. Worse, they are being sunk predictably. American submarines appear at the same choke points again and again, as if they can read Japanese schedules. Convoys, rerouted for safety sail straight into new ambushes. Emergency fuel shipments vanish days after departure. A senior officer at Combined Fleet Headquarters circles a number on a logistics chart in red. Fuel deliveries have dropped below the minimum required to operate the fleet. Below minimum. That word minimum hangs in the room like smoke. This is the moment the war quietly turns. Not with a battle, not with a declaration, but with a realization. The Imperial Japanese Navy cannot fight anymore, not because it has lost ships, but because it cannot move them. Carriers sit idle. Destroyers remain tied to piers. Battleships become stationary batteries, their massive guns useless without fuel to carry them into battle. Pilots are grounded. Training hours are slashed. New aviators arrive at the front barely competent, flying fewer hours in a month than American pilots log in a week. And through it all, American submarines continue their patrols unseen, relentless. In Washington, analysts begin to grasp what the submarine force has achieved. This was never about tonnage alone. It was about paralysis. Each tanker sunk is a future sortie canceled. Each convoy destroyed is a training exercise never flown, a destroyer never escorted, a carrier never launched. By late 1944, American submarines, just 2% of the U.S. Navy's personnel, are responsible for more than half of all Japanese shipping losses. An astonishing figure. One that Japanese commanders now understand too late. Inside Japan, the consequences are visible even to civilians. Factory output stutters as fuel deliveries fail. Power shortages ripple through industrial centers. Transportation slows. Food shipments arrive late or not at all. And the military feels it first. Fleet planners sketch ambitious operations, then cross them out when fuel allocations are reviewed. Each plan becomes smaller than the last, each one more desperate. The dream of decisive battle fades. What remains is survival. For the men aboard USS Tang, the war feels different. Victories come often now, too often. The enemy's mistakes are predictable, their defenses weak. The confidence that once fueled Japanese naval power has evaporated, replaced by caution and exhaustion. O'Kane senses it in every encounter. Escorts break formation too quickly. Depth charge patterns are sloppy. Some convoys barely maneuver at all, as if hoping to be missed rather than defended. They are not fighting to win. They are fighting to endure. Yet even as the collapse becomes undeniable, the cost remains brutal. Submarine warfare is unforgiving. A single mistake, one unlucky depth charge, one torpedo that circles back, one moment of overconfidence can erase an entire crew. And that mistake is coming because in October 1944, on Tang's 5th War Patrol, something goes catastrophically wrong. A torpedo fired from Tang's bow malfunctions. It circles, and it is coming back. October 24, 1944, 11:47 p.m., Formosa Strait. The night is moonless, the sea black and restless. USS Tang rides just below the surface, her decks slick with spray, engines humming at low power. Inside the control room, tension coils tight. This is Tang's 5th patrol, and already her most successful. Commander Richard O'Kane has just ordered a spread of torpedoes fired at a convoy silhouetted faintly against the horizon. Fire! 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 5 torpedoes leave the tubes in sequence, streaking toward their targets. The first 4 run true. Explosions bloom across the water. A transport ship shatters. A tanker erupts in flame. Another vessel begins to sink by the bow. The escorts scatter in confusion, searchlights slashing the darkness. Then someone shouts, "Torpedo bearing 090, closing fast." O'Kane turns. Too fast. One of Tang's torpedoes has malfunctioned. Instead of running straight, it has curved, executing a fatal, tightening circle. There is no time to dive. No time to turn. The torpedo slams into Tang's stern. The explosion rips through the submarine like a giant's fist. Water floods in instantly. Lights go out. The deck tilts sharply. Men are thrown against bulkheads. The stern compartments are obliterated. Everyone there is killed instantly. Tang begins to sink. In the darkness, O'Kane shouts orders, his voice cutting through chaos. Damage control teams fight instinctively, even as seawater surges through ruptured hull plates. The angle steepens, air hisses, pressure builds. This is the nightmare every submariner carries with him, and now it is real. Tang settles on the seabed in nearly 180 feet of water. Inside the shattered hull, silence follows the violence, broken only by the sound of escaping air and distant explosions as Japanese escorts continue to drop depth charges, unaware the submarine they are hunting is already dead on the bottom. Only 8 men survive the initial blast. 8. They gather in a single compartment, injured, exhausted, choking on foul air. Among them is O'Kane. He takes stock, calm even now. There's only one way out. The Momsen lung, a crude breathing apparatus designed for emergency submarine escapes. One by one, the survivors flood the compartment, equalize pressure, and escape into the black water above. Some never make it. Panic, injury, darkness. Only 5 reach the surface alive. They are pulled from the water by Japanese escort vessels, enemy ships. The war for them is over. When news of Tang's loss reaches the American submarine force, it hits hard. Tang was the embodiment of everything the U.S. submarine campaign had become: aggressive, precise, devastating. In just 5 patrols, she had sunk more tonnage than almost any submarine in history. And yet, in an instant, she was gone. This is the cost of strangling an empire. Victory in the Pacific is being paid for in steel coffins and quiet sacrifices, far from the headlines of carrier battles and island invasions. For the Japanese Navy, Tang's loss changes nothing. The damage has already been done. By late 1944, fuel shortages cripple operations across the fleet. The great battleships Yamato and Musashi, symbols of imperial power, spend most of their time idle, unable to maneuver freely. When they finally sortie, it is on one-way missions. The oil is gone. In captivity, O'Kane listens as Japanese officers speak openly, sometimes bitterly, about the submarine campaign. They no longer mock it. They dissect it, obsess over it. They know now. They know American submarines have won the unseen war. As 1945 approaches, the Pacific battles grow larger and bloodier. Iwo Jima, Okinawa, the firebombing of Japan, atomic weapons. But beneath all of it, under every decision, every limitation, every desperate plan, is a simple fact. Japan can no longer move. Its fleet is a fleet in name only. And that began years earlier, in the dark, with quiet men in steel boats that Japanese admirals once laughed at. The laughter is gone. In its place is the slow realization that wars are not always decided by the biggest guns or the loudest battles. Sometimes they are decided by who controls the fuel.